The wagon lurched violently as it struck another rock, sending Caroline Whitmore sprawling against the wooden side panel. She clutched her worn carpetbag tighter, the last of her possessions rattling inside like bones. The driver, a sun-weathered man named Jeb McCarthy, hadn't spoken a word in the past 2 hours, save for the occasional curse at his mules. "How much farther?" Caroline asked, her voice hoarse from the dust that coated everything in this God-forsaken land. Jeb spat tobacco juice over the side. "Another hour, maybe 2. Depends if the trail holds." Caroline nodded, though he couldn't see her from where she sat in the back. She'd learned not to expect conversation from these frontier men. They viewed her with a mixture of pity and suspicion. A young widow with no family, no money, heading to work for what Jeb had called that peculiar Apache fellow. The red rocks rose around them like ancient sentinels, their shadows lengthening as the sun began its descent. Caroline had never seen such desolate beauty. Back in Ohio, before James died of fever, she'd imagined the West as a land of opportunity. Now, bouncing in the back of this wagon toward an unknown fate, it felt more like purgatory. "You sure about this, ma'am?" Jeb finally asked, his voice carrying an edge of concern she hadn't heard before. "That Red Hawk, he ain't like regular folk, lives out there all alone. Don't come to town but once or twice a year. Some say he's got Apache magic, others say worse things." Caroline straightened her spine. "I need the work. Mr. McCarthy, that's all that matters." Still, Jeb shifted uneasily on his seat. "A white woman, alone with one of them, it ain't proper, ain't safe." "I'll manage," Caroline said firmly, though her heart hammered against her ribs. She'd heard the warnings back at the boarding house before Mrs. Garrett had thrown her out for non-payment, but what choice did she have? The advertisement had been simple. Cook needed, remote ranch, good pay. Ask for Red Hawk at Murphy's store. Good pay. That's what had decided her. Enough to save, maybe enough to eventually head further west to California, where no one knew her shame, that her husband had died leaving debts that consumed everything, that his family had disowned her, that she'd sold her wedding ring for food. The trail wound through a narrow canyon, the walls pressing close enough that Caroline could see layers of ancient stone, red and orange and purple in the dying light. Wind howled through the passage, a mournful sound that raised the hair on her neck. Then, suddenly, they emerged into a valley. Caroline gasped. After the barren rock and scrub, this hidden place seemed impossible. A stream cut through the center, lined with cottonwoods and willows. Grass, actual green grass, carpeted the valley floor. And there, built against the far canyon wall, stood a collection of buildings, a main house of adobe and timber, a barn, several outbuildings, and corrals where horses grazed. "Lord have mercy," Jeb muttered. "Never knew this was here." As they descended into the valley, Caroline noticed the details that spoke of careful work: irrigated garden plots, well-maintained fences, a windmill turning lazily in the evening breeze. This wasn't the ramshackle operation she'd expected from a lone man in the wilderness. The wagon rolled to a stop before the main house. Caroline's mouth went dry. She smoothed her travel-stained dress, knowing it was futile. 3 days on the trail had left her dusty and disheveled. Hardly the image of a competent housekeeper. "Hello, the house!" Jeb called out. The door opened, and Caroline's breath caught. The man who emerged had to duck beneath the lintel. He stood nearly 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders that seemed to block out the doorway. His skin was the color of burnished copper, his black hair long and tied back with a leather cord. He wore the clothes of a rancher: denim pants, cotton shirt, boots. But something in his bearing spoke of wildness barely contained. His face. Caroline had expected savagery, the fierce countenances she'd seen in newspaper illustrations of Apache warriors. Instead, she found herself looking at features that were strong but calm: high cheekbones, a firm jaw, and eyes so dark they seemed to hold the night sky. Those eyes fixed on her now, and Caroline felt exposed, as if he could see through her pretense of confidence to the frightened, desperate woman beneath. "You are the cook." His voice was deep, rumbling like distant thunder, but his English was clear, only lightly accented. Caroline climbed down from the wagon. Grateful, her trembling legs held her. "Yes, Caroline Whitmore. I came about the position." He studied her for a long moment, and she had the unsettling feeling she was being weighed and measured by standards she couldn't fathom. Then he nodded once, a gesture so slight she almost missed it. "I am Taza Redhawk. You are welcome." He moved to take her carpetbag from the wagon, and Caroline noticed how carefully he kept distance between them, how he avoided any chance of contact. When he lifted her bag as if it weighed nothing, the muscles in his arms shifted beneath his shirt, and she quickly looked away. "I'll be heading back now," Jeb announced, clearly eager to leave. "Ma'am, if you change your mind—" "Thank you, Mr. McCarthy," Caroline said firmly. "I'll be fine." Jeb looked doubtful, but clicked to his mules. As the wagon rolled away, Caroline felt a moment of pure panic. She was alone now, truly alone, with this silent giant in a hidden valley miles from anywhere. "Come," Taza said, already walking toward the house. "I will show you where you will stay." Caroline followed, noting the careful organization of the ranch, the cleanliness despite the isolation. Inside, the house surprised her again. Simple but well-made furniture, a stone fireplace, shelves holding a few books. The kitchen was spacious and well-equipped, with a modern stove and plenty of workspace. "Your room," Taza said, gesturing to a doorway off the kitchen. Caroline peered inside, a small but clean space with a bed, dresser, and window looking out toward the stream. It was more than she'd had at the boarding house. "It's perfect," she said, turning to thank him. But Taza had already retreated to the far side of the kitchen, maintaining that careful distance. In the lamplight, she could see him more clearly. Despite his imposing size, there was something gentle in the way he moved, a quietness that seemed at odds with his powerful frame. "You begin tomorrow," he said. "Tonight, rest. There is food in the pantry. The stream water is good to drink." He paused, and something flickered in those dark eyes. "The wind here. It howls at night. Do not be frightened. You are safe." With that, he turned and left, disappearing into the gathering darkness outside. Caroline stood alone in the kitchen, her heart still racing. She'd expected many things from this position: hard work, loneliness, perhaps danger, but she hadn't expected this, a hidden valley like something from a fairy tale. A man who moved like a warrior but spoke with unexpected courtesy, and the feeling that she'd stepped not just into a job, but into something far more mysterious. She prepared a simple meal from the well-stocked pantry, marveling at the supplies. Whoever this Taza Redhawk was, he lived better than most ranchers she'd known. As she ate, the promised wind began, howling through the canyon like a living thing, but wrapped in the solid walls of the house, with a full belly for the first time in weeks. Caroline felt oddly protected. That night, as she lay in the narrow bed, she thought about the way Taza had looked at her, not with the hungry eyes she'd grown accustomed to from men, but with something deeper and more unsettling. Assessment, certainly, but underneath that, she'd sensed something else, something that made no sense given they'd just met. Recognition, as if he'd been waiting for her. The wind sang its lonely song, and Caroline pulled the blankets higher, wondering what she'd gotten herself into. Tomorrow would bring answers, or perhaps only more questions. Either way, she was here now, in this hidden valley with its mysterious guardian, with nowhere else to go. As sleep finally took her, her last thought was of those dark eyes and the careful distance he'd maintained, as if he didn't trust himself to come closer. Or perhaps, a whisper in her mind suggested, as if he was protecting her from something she didn't yet understand. The sandstorm hit on her 7th day at the ranch. Caroline watched through the kitchen window as the sky turned an ominous yellow-brown, the wind picking up dust and debris, turning the peaceful valley into a maelstrom of swirling sand. Taza appeared at the back door, his tall frame bent against the wind. "Close all windows. The storm will last 3 days, maybe more." His dark eyes met hers briefly before he turned away. "You have enough food. Stay inside." Caroline nodded, but as she moved to secure the shutters, anger flared in her chest. 7 days of this. 7 days of him appearing only at mealtimes, eating in silence, then disappearing to wherever he spent his hours. She'd come here to cook, yes, but his deliberate avoidance felt like judgment, as if she carried some disease he might catch. That evening, with the storm raging outside, Caroline had finished preparing supper, beef stew with vegetables from the garden, fresh bread, and preserved peaches. She set 2 places as always, then waited and waited. An hour passed. The stew grew cold. The bread hardened. Finally, she marched to the door and yanked it open. Sand immediately assaulted her, but she squinted through it toward the barn where lamplight glowed faintly through the cracks. "Mr. Red Hawk," she called into the wind. "Supper." No response. Caroline's temper, already frayed from days of silent treatment, snapped. She pulled her shawl over her head and plunged into the storm. The wind nearly knocked her down, sand stinging her exposed skin, but she pressed on, guided by the faint light. She burst through the barn door to find Taza sitting on a hay bale, mending a harness by lamplight. He looked up, startled, the first genuine emotion she'd seen from him. "What are you doing?" He rose quickly, moving toward her. "The storm is exactly why you should be inside, eating a hot meal." Caroline interrupted, shaking sand from her shawl. "Instead, you're out here hiding like I'm some kind of plague." His face shuddered again, returning to that carved stillness. "I did not wish to disturb you." "Disturb me?" Caroline laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You hired me to cook. How am I disturbing you by doing my job? Or is it that you can't bear to share a table with a white woman? Is that it?" Something flashed in his eyes. Pain, quickly hidden. "No." "Then what?" She stepped closer, and he actually backed away. 7 days, Mr. Red Hawk. 7 days of you treating me like I'm invisible. If you didn't want me here, why did you hire me?" The barn shook with a particularly fierce gust of wind. Taza stood frozen, his massive frame tense, hands clenched at his sides. "Answer me," Caroline demanded, "or I'm leaving the moment this storm breaks. I may be desperate, but I'm not so far gone that I'll stay where I'm not wanted." "I want you here." The words came out rough, forced, as if torn from somewhere deep inside him. Caroline waited, but he said nothing more. "Then why?" "Because I chose you to be my wife." The words hung in the air between them, more shocking than any thunderclap. Caroline's mind went blank. She must have misheard. The wind, the sand, her own anger. Surely he hadn't said, "What?" The word came out as a whisper. Taza turned away, his shoulders rigid. "I should not have said this. Forget, don't you dare!" Caroline's voice shook, but she pressed on. "Don't you dare drop something like that and then tell me to forget it. What do you mean? You chose me?" He was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible over the storm. "My mother made me promise, before she died. If I take a wife, she must be—" He paused, searching for words. "Someone who knows suffering. Someone cast aside, as I have been cast aside. Someone strong enough to bear this life." Caroline sank onto a nearby crate, her legs suddenly weak. "And you think I'm that person? You don't even know me." "I know enough." He turned back to her, and in the lamplight, she saw something raw and vulnerable in his face. "I know you are widow. I know your husband's family threw you away. I know you sold everything, even your wedding ring. I know you took this job because you had nowhere else to go. How could you possibly—" "Murphy at the store. He talks, and I ask questions before I place the advertisement." Caroline stared at him, anger and confusion warring in her chest. "So you, what, investigated me? Decided I was pathetic enough to fit your requirements?" "Not pathetic." He moved closer, though still maintaining distance. "Strong. You survived loss. You did not give up. You came here to unknown place. To work for Apache man everyone fears. This takes courage. Or desperation, Caroline said bitterly. Both, he agreed. My mother had both. She was taken from her family, brought to live with Apache. Everyone expected her to run, to die of grief. Instead, she chose to stay. She chose my father. She chose to make a life. His voice softened. She was happiest woman I knew. Caroline stood abruptly, pacing the small space. This is insane. You can't just decide someone should be your wife. That's not how it works. I know how white people do marriage, Taza said quietly. Papers in churches and permission from families. But I am not white people. I noticed, Caroline said dryly, then immediately regretted it when he flinched. I didn't mean, you meant... His voice held no accusation, just acceptance. This is why I stay away. I see how you look at me sometimes. Fear, curiosity. Like I am wild animal, you must watch carefully. Caroline opened her mouth to deny it, then stopped. Wasn't that exactly how she'd looked at him those first days? I frighten you, he continued. This is natural. I'm not like men you know. So I give you space. Time to see I am not savage the town speaks of. But perhaps I am wrong. Perhaps I am exactly that savage. To think I could choose you, that you could choose me back. The pain in his voice cut through her anger. Caroline moved closer, close enough to see the lamplight dancing in his dark eyes. You don't frighten me, she said softly. Not anymore. You confuse me, you anger me, but you don't frighten me. He looked at her then, really looked at her. And Caroline felt that same sensation from the first night of being truly seen. Why me? She asked. Of all the women who might need work, why choose me? He was quiet for a moment. The day I saw you at Murphy's store, you were buying thread with your last coins. Your dress was mended many times, but clean, pressed. You held your head high even when the other women whispered, and when that drunk tried to grab you. Caroline remembered. A filthy miner pawing at her, assuming a woman alone was fair game. You hit him with a can of peaches, Taza continued, and was that a hint of a smile? Knocked him flat, then you bought your thread and walked out like queen. I thought, this woman has iron in her spine. She would not break in this hard place. So you decided I should be your wife based on my skill with canned goods? This time he did smile, just slightly. Based on your strength, your dignity, your refusal to be made small. Caroline found herself sitting again, overwhelmed. I can't. You're asking too much. I ask nothing. He moved toward the door. I spoke truth. I should have kept silent. You will stay until storm breaks. Then Jeb will take you back. I will pay full month wages. Wait. Caroline stood as he reached for the door. Just wait. He paused but didn't turn. Where will you sleep if I stay in the house? Here, the barn is warm enough. In a sandstorm? That's ridiculous. She took a breath. Come eat supper. I need time to think. But I won't have you sleeping with the horses because of my hurt feelings. He turned slowly. You are not leaving. I don't know what I'm doing, Caroline admitted. But I know I won't figure it out standing here. Come on, the stew's gone cold. But it's still edible. They made their way back through the storm, Taza's large frame shielding her from the worst of the wind. In the kitchen, Caroline reheated the food while he washed the sand from his hands and face. They ate in silence, but it felt different from before, charged with possibility rather than avoidance. When they finished, Taza rose to leave again, but Caroline stopped him. Tell me about your mother. He looked surprised but slowly sat back down. As the storm raged outside, he began to speak, his deep voice painting pictures of a white woman who learned Apache ways, who chose love over the life she'd known, who raised a son between two worlds and taught him to be proud of both. Caroline listened, watching his face soften with memory, seeing the man beneath the careful control. When he finally fell silent, she found herself thinking that maybe, just maybe, his wild proposition wasn't as insane as it seemed. But she kept that thought to herself as she bid him good night and watched him disappear once more into the storm, this time to the small room off the barn he'd mentioned. She stood at her window, watching the faint light from his lamp, and wondered at the strange turn her life had taken. Chosen to be a wife. Not courted, not wooed, but chosen. It should have offended her. Instead, she found herself curious about this man who saw strength where others saw only a desperate widow, who kept promises to dead mothers, who smiled when remembering her assault with canned peaches. The storm howled on, but inside, Caroline felt the first stirrings of something that might have been hope. The weeks following the sandstorm passed in a rhythm Caroline hadn't expected. She rose at dawn to make breakfast, and Taza appeared precisely at 6, ate with quiet appreciation, then headed out to tend the ranch. He returned for the noon meal, then again at sunset. But now, instead of disappearing immediately after, he lingered. At first, it was just to help dry dishes, then to repair a loose board in the pantry. Gradually, their after-supper time stretched longer. He taught her to identify the calls of night birds. She told him about Ohio, about green hills and snow-covered winters so different from this red rock desert. One evening, 3 weeks after the storm, Caroline struggled with the garden gate latch that had rusted shut. "Let me," Taza said, appearing beside her. She stepped back, watching his strong hands work the metal. He'd rolled his sleeves up, and she found herself noticing the play of muscle beneath his copper skin, the careful way he applied just enough force without breaking the delicate mechanism. "There." He swung the gate open smoothly. "It needs oil. I will bring some tomorrow." "Thank you." Caroline moved to pass through, but her foot caught on an exposed root. She pitched forward with a startled cry. Taza caught her instantly, his large hands circling her waist, lifting her as easily as a child. For a moment, she was suspended against his chest, feeling the solid warmth of him through his shirt, breathing in his scent of leather and sage and something uniquely him. Their eyes met, his pupils dilated, and she saw his throat work as he swallowed hard. Then, carefully, he set her on her feet and stepped back. "You are hurt." "No, Caroline's voice came out breathless. "I'm fine." They stood frozen, the moment stretching between them like spun glass. Then Taza turned abruptly and strode away, leaving Caroline touching her waist where his hands had been, feeling branded by their heat. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt those hands again, saw the hunger that had flashed in his dark eyes before he'd hidden it. Her body responded in ways it hadn't since before James had gotten sick. A warmth low in her belly that made her shift restlessly beneath the covers. The next morning, Taza didn't appear for breakfast. Caroline waited, watching his untouched plate grow cold. Finally, worry overcoming pride, she went looking for him. She found him by the stream, standing knee-deep in the cold water, shirtless, his bronze skin gleaming with moisture. She should have turned away. A decent woman would have. Instead, she stood transfixed, watching the water run down his broad back, over scars she hadn't known were there, some old and faded, others newer. Without thinking, she moved closer. He must have heard her, because he turned, water droplets catching the morning sun like diamonds on his skin. They stared at each other across the distance. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "Yesterday, I should not have touched you. You kept me from falling. I touched you too long, held too tight." He waded toward shore, and Caroline's mouth went dry as more of him emerged from the water. "I try to keep distance, but sometimes—" "Sometimes what?" He pulled his shirt from a nearby rock, shrugging into it with his back to her. "Sometimes I forget I am Apache and you are white woman. Sometimes I only remember you are beautiful and I am man who has been alone too long." The words sent heat flooding through her. Caroline pressed her palms against her skirts, trying to steady herself. "Is that why you stood me up for breakfast? Because you're attracted to me?" He turned then, his shirt hanging open, and the look in his eyes made her take a step back. "I stayed away because last night I dreamed of you." His voice was rough, raw. I dreamed of touching more than your waist. I dreamed of your hair spread across my bed, your skin pale as moonlight against mine. I woke wanting you so fierce I could not trust myself to sit across table and pretend I do not. Caroline's breath came short. No man had ever spoken to her like this, with such naked honesty. James had courted her with pretty words and proper distances. This was something else entirely, desire laid bare, without pretense or shame. You said you chose me to be your wife, she managed, but you never court me. You never try to win me. White man's courting? He laughed, but it held no humor. Flowers and poems and little gifts. I know nothing of such things. Apache man shows his worth by providing, protecting, by being patient, letting woman see his true heart over time. But perhaps this is not enough for white woman. I didn't say that. Caroline moved closer, drawn despite herself. But how can I know your heart when you hide from me? You want to know my heart? He closed the distance between them in 2 strides, stopping just out of reach. My heart burns every time you smile. My heart stops when you sing while cooking. My heart tells me I am fool to think you could want Apache husband, but also tells me I will die if you leave. Caroline's knees felt weak. Taza, no. He stepped back. I should not say such things. You deserve better than man who lives hidden in valley, who cannot even take you to town without causing shame. I've had shame, Caroline said fiercely. I've had whispers and pointed fingers and proper people looking at me like dirt, at least here, with you. I'm just Caroline, not the widow, not the debtor, not the woman with no family. Just Caroline who can hit a man with peaches and make bread that doesn't burn and isn't afraid of sandstorms anymore. Something shifted in his face. You are not afraid? Of storms? No. She took a breath. Of you? Sometimes, not because you're Apache, because of how you make me feel. How do I make you feel? The question hung between them. Caroline knew she stood at a crossroads. She could retreat, keep things safe and professional. Or, alive, she whispered. For the first time since James died, maybe since before he got sick, you make me feel alive. Taza closed his eyes as if her words pained him. When he opened them again, they burned with an intensity that made her shiver. Come, he said roughly. I will show you something. He led her up a winding path she hadn't noticed before, climbing the canyon wall to a hidden ledge. There, protected by an overhang, were pictographs, ancient drawings on stone. My mother brought me here, he said, tracing a figure with his finger but not touching the rock. Apache drawings, but also others, older. She said this place was sacred to First Peoples, long before Apache, before Spanish, before white men, place where earth touches sky. Caroline looked out over the valley spread below, the morning light painting everything gold. It was breathtakingly beautiful. Why show me this? Because if you stay, if you choose to be my wife, this is what I offer. Not towns or churches or society. Just this valley, this life, this man who dreams of you. He turned to her. Is it enough? Caroline studied him, this giant of a man who handled horses with gentleness, who kept promises to dead mothers, who burned for her but held himself back with iron control. She thought of the alternative, returning to town, finding another position where she'd be invisible at best, prey at worst, always alone, always struggling. Here, she had work that mattered. Here, she had a man who saw her strength instead of her shame. Ask me again, she said softly. His brow furrowed. Ask what? What you asked that night in the barn, but properly this time. Understanding dawned in his eyes, slowly, as if afraid she might bolt. He took her hand, the first time he deliberately touched her since catching her at the gate. Caroline Whitmore, he said, his deep voice formal but trembling slightly. Will you be my wife? She looked at their joined hands, his so large and dark, hers pale and small but no less strong. I need time, to truly know you, to be certain, but I'm willing to try, to see if what's between us is real. His smile transformed his face, years dropping away until she could see the boy he must have been. This is more than I dared hope. They stood there on the ledge, hands linked, watching the sun climb higher. Caroline felt something settle in her chest. Not quite peace, not quite certainty, but the possibility of both. "Teach me," she said suddenly. "Teach you what?" "Everything. About ranching, about this land, about your people. If I'm to be your wife, I want to be true partner, not just cook and housekeeper." His hand tightened on hers. "You would learn Apache ways. I'd learn your ways." She corrected. "Apache, white, whatever mixture makes you who you are." He lifted their joined hands and pressed his lips to her knuckles, the gesture achingly tender from such a powerful man. "Then we begin today." As they made their way back down the trail, Caroline felt the sun on her face and Taza's steady presence beside her. For the first time in over a year, the future held promise instead of dread. It wouldn't be easy. She knew that, but standing in that sacred place, seeing the hope in his eyes, she thought maybe, just maybe, it would be worth it. That evening, as she served supper, Taza caught her hand again. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For staying, for listening, for being willing to try." Caroline squeezed his fingers. "Thank you for choosing me." They ate together in comfortable silence, and when night fell, Taza didn't immediately leave. Instead, he helped her clean up, then sat by the fire as she mended one of his shirts. It was domestic, peaceful, and Caroline found herself imagining many such evenings stretching ahead. She was learning to hope again, and in this hidden valley with its ancient secrets and patient guardian, hope didn't seem foolish at all. The thunder of hoofbeats shattered the valley's morning peace. Caroline looked up from the garden where she'd been teaching Taza to distinguish between vegetable seedlings and weeds, their hands occasionally brushing as they worked side by side, each touch sending warmth through her. 4 riders appeared at the valley's entrance, and Taza immediately stood, pushing Caroline behind him. "Stay close to the house," he said quietly, but she heard the tension in his voice. The riders approached with the arrogant confidence of men who expected fear. Caroline recognized their type, the same breed who'd hassled her in town, who believed their white skin gave them dominion over everything and everyone. The leader, a thick-set man with cold gray eyes, spat tobacco juice near Taza's feet. Well, the rumors are true. A white woman living with a savage. State your business and leave," Taza said calmly, though Caroline saw his hands clench. "Our business?" The man laughed uglily. "Our business is protecting decent white women from animals like you." His eyes found Caroline. "Ma'am, we're here to rescue you. Whatever this redskin's done to you, whatever he's threatened, it's over now." Caroline stepped out from behind Taza. "No one's done anything to me. I work here. Please leave." The second rider, younger with a scraggly beard, sneered. "Work? Is that what they're calling it now? A white woman working for an Apache? Watch your tongue," Taza warned, his voice dropping dangerously low. "Or what?" The leader dismounted, hand moving to his gun. "You'll scalp us. Show your true nature." He looked at Caroline again. "Ma'am, I'm Ben Hartley, and these are concerned citizens from Cedar Falls. We've come to take you back to civilization, willing or not." "I said I don't need rescue," Caroline said firmly, though her heart raced. "That's what they all say when they're scared," the young one said. "Don't worry, we'll protect you from him. The only thing I need protection from is you." Caroline snapped. Hartley's face darkened. "Now you listen here." He reached for Caroline's arm. Taza moved faster than lightning, his hand closing around Hartley's wrist with an audible crack. Hartley cried out, dropping to his knees. "Touch her again and I break it," Taza said quietly. The other 3 men went for their guns. Taza released Hartley and shoved Caroline toward the house. "Run!" But Caroline grabbed the shovel she'd been using and swung it at the nearest rider. Catching him in the knee, he howled and fell from his horse. The fight was brutal and quick. Taza moved with a warrior's grace, disarming one man and using the gun butt to knock him unconscious. But there were 4 of them, and as Caroline watched in horror, Hartley, still on the ground, pulled a hidden derringer and fired. Taza grunted and staggered, blood blooming on his shoulder. Caroline screamed and swung the shovel again. Catching Hartley in the temple, he crumpled. The remaining 2 men, seeing their leader down and Taza still standing despite the blood, backed toward their horses. "This ain't over," one called. "The whole town'll hear about this. We'll be back with a posse." They grabbed their unconscious companions, threw them over horses, and fled. Caroline dropped the shovel and ran to Taza, who'd sunk to one knee, hand pressed to his shoulder. Let me see," she demanded, pulling his hand away. The wound bled freely but looked clean, the bullet having passed through the meat of his shoulder. "Inside," he managed. "Need to stop the bleeding." She helped him to the house, her own hands shaking now that the immediate danger had passed. In the kitchen, she settled him in a chair and fetched medical supplies, grateful he kept them well stocked. "This will hurt," she warned, cleaning the wound with whiskey. He didn't make a sound, though she saw his jaw clench. As she worked, tears blurred her vision. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "This is my fault. If I wasn't here—" "Stop." His good hand caught hers. "This is not your doing. Men like that need no excuse for hate." She wrapped the bandage tight, then sat back to look at him. Blood stained his shirt. His face was gray with pain, but his eyes remained steady on hers. "They'll come back," she said. "With more men." "Yes." "We should leave." "Go somewhere." "Where?" He shook his head slightly. "There is nowhere for Apache man and white woman. North, south, east, west. Everywhere the same." Caroline's hands trembled as she helped him out of the ruined shirt. The wound was ugly, but would heal cleanly if kept from infection. As she worked, she noticed other scars. A bullet graze on his ribs, knife marks on his back. This wasn't his first fight for survival. "Tell me about these," she said softly, tracing an old scar with her fingertip. He shivered at her touch. "That one, from when I was 15, white soldiers came to our camp, said we stole cattle. We had no cattle, but they didn't care." His voice was matter-of-fact, but she heard old pain beneath. "This one, from man who tried to hang me for walking on his land. This, from when I defended my mother's honor in town." Each scar a story of survival, of a man caught between worlds and welcome in neither. Caroline's heart ached for the boy he'd been, for the man who'd endured so much yet remained gentle. "I won't let them take me," she said fiercely. "I won't let them hurt you again." He caught her hand, pressing it flat against his chest, where his heart beat strong despite the injury. "You would stay, even now, knowing what it means. Especially now." She met his eyes. "Those men came here thinking I was their property to retrieve, that you were an animal with no rights. They're wrong on both counts." Something shifted in his expression. He pulled her closer, and she went willingly, standing between his knees as he sat. His good arm circled her waist. "Caroline," he breathed, and her name on his lips was prayer and plea combined. She cupped his face in her hands, feeling the rasp of stubble, the warm copper of his skin. "I'm not leaving, Taza, not unless you send me away." "Never," he said roughly, then pulled her down and kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate and hungry, full of fear and need and promises. Caroline had been kissed before, sweet pecks from James during their courtship, respectful and proper. This was different. This was claiming and being claimed, giving and taking in equal measure. She tasted blood from his split lip, salt from her own tears, and underneath it all, the wild sweetness of desire too long denied. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she saw her own wonder reflected in his eyes. "I love you," he said simply. "I think I loved you from the moment you knocked that fool down with peaches. Despite everything." Caroline laughed, the sound watery but real. "I think I started loving you when you gave me space to choose." He pressed his forehead to hers. What do we do now? She thought of the men who'd fled, the promised posse, the town's hatred waiting to descend on them. Then she looked at this man who'd bled for her, who'd spent weeks showing her his heart through actions rather than words, who made her feel precious and strong all at once. Now we prepare, she said. We shore up defenses, we tend your wound, and if they come back… She smiled grimly. I'm getting better with that shovel. He laughed, then winced as it pulled his shoulder. My warrior woman. That night, as rain began to fall, Caroline sat vigil beside Taza's bed. He developed a slight fever, nothing serious yet, but enough to worry her. She bathed his forehead with cool cloths, held his hand when pain made him restless, somewhere in the darkest hours. He woke fully, eyes focusing on her face. You're still here, he murmured. Where else would I be? He squeezed her hand. Marry me. Not someday. Now. Apache way. Before they come back. Before anything else can happen. Be my wife. Caroline's heart raced. How? There's no preacher who would… No preacher needed… Only us, our hearts, our promise. He struggled to sit up, and she helped him. In my mother's tradition, marriage needed only true words spoken under sky, gifts exchanged, hearts joined. Will you? She thought of white weddings, churches and flowers and family, all things she'd never have anyway, with or without Taza. What he offered was simpler but no less sacred, a promise between two souls who'd found each other against all odds. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Despite his injury, he smiled bright as sunrise. Tomorrow, when sun sets, I will make you my wife, and let any man try to take you from me then. Caroline kissed him softly, carefully. Tomorrow they'd face whatever came, but tonight, in this moment, they had each other and the promise of forever, however long that might be. The rain continued, washing the blood from the ground outside, but unable to wash away what had been forged in violence and sealed in love. They were two people the world said shouldn't be together, choosing each other anyway, and that choice would make all the difference. The sunset painted the valley in shades of gold and crimson as Caroline stood by the stream, wearing her best dress, a simple blue calico, mended but clean. Taza waited on the opposite bank, his injured arm bound but his bearing proud. Between them, the water ran clear and swift, catching the dying light. In my mother's people, water is sacred, Taza said, his deep voice carrying across the stream. It divides but also joins. We stand on opposite banks as two people, but when we cross, we become one. Caroline's heart hammered against her ribs. They'd spent the day preparing her baking bread for their wedding feast, him crafting something in secret despite his injury. Now, as evening birds called and wind stirred the cottonwoods, the moment had come. I have nothing to give you, Caroline said, sudden doubt creeping in. No dowry, no family treasures, nothing but myself. You are everything. Taza replied, but I have gifts for you, as tradition demands. From behind his back, he produced a necklace, silver and turquoise, delicate yet strong. This was my mother's. Her mother gave it to her when she married my father. Now it passes to you. Tears blurred Caroline's vision as he stepped into the stream, water swirling around his boots. She met him halfway, gasping at the cold that soaked her skirts. With his good hand, he fastened the necklace around her throat. The metal was warm from his touch, the stones smooth against her skin. I, Taza Red Hawk, take you, Caroline Whitmore, as my wife, he said solemnly. I promise to provide for you, protect you, honor you. I promise to teach you my ways and learn yours. I promise that your sorrows will be my sorrows, your joys my joys, until the mountains fall and the streams run dry. Caroline reached up to touch the necklace, then placed her hand over his heart. I, Caroline Whitmore, take you, Taza Red Hawk, as my husband. I promise to stand beside you, care for you, be your partner in all things. I promise to be brave when the world is cruel, strong when times are hard, and loving always. I promise that your home will be my home, your people my people, until the stars fall from the sky. He cupped her face in his hand, thumb brushing away a tear. "Now we seal it. Apache way." From a pouch at his belt, he withdrew a small knife. Before Caroline could react, he made a small cut on his palm, then offered her the blade. Understanding, she did the same, wincing slightly. They pressed their palms together, blood mingling. "Two lives, one blood," he murmured. "Two hearts, one spirit." Then he kissed her, there in the middle of the stream with water rushing around them and their hands clasped tight. When they broke apart, Caroline felt changed, marked somehow beyond the physical. They waded to shore together, and Taza led her to where he'd prepared a surprise, a small shelter of branches and blankets, a fire already laid, food waiting, their wedding bower. Simple but perfect. "How did you manage this with your shoulder?" Caroline asked, touched by the effort. "Love gives strength," he said simply. They ate bread and dried fruit, drank cool water flavored with mint, and talked as darkness fell, without the constraints of propriety. Caroline found herself sharing things she'd never told anyone. Her fear when James first got sick, her shame at the debts, her nights of crying alone. Taza listened, holding her hand, occasionally kissing her palm where the cut was already healing. He shared, too, the loneliness of being neither fully Apache nor white, the pain of watching his mother die, the years of building this ranch as a fortress against a hostile world. When the fire burned low, he stood and offered his hand. "Come, wife." The word sent shivers through her. Wife. Not legally, perhaps, but in every way that mattered to them. Inside the house, in his room that would now be theirs. Caroline felt suddenly shy. The bed loomed large, and memories of duty-bound nights with James made her tense. Taza sensed her hesitation. "We have time," he said gently. "I can wait." "No." Caroline turned to face him. I've had proper and careful and considerate. That's not what I want from you." His eyes darkened. "What do you want?" "You," she said simply. "All of you. The wildness you hide, the passion you control so carefully. I want the man who fights for riders without flinching. I want the Apache warrior, not the careful rancher. You don't know what you ask," he said roughly. "I have wanted you so long. Caroline, if I let go..." She silenced him with a kiss, pouring all her own desire into it. "Then let go," she whispered against his lips. "I'm not fragile. I'm not afraid. I'm your wife." What followed was unlike anything from her first marriage, where James had been apologetic about his needs. Taza was unapologetic in his hunger. His hands were sure despite his injury, knowing exactly where to touch to make her gasp. He whispered to her in Apache, words she didn't understand but whose meaning was clear in the reverent way he said them. Caroline discovered her own wildness in response. The widow's weeds fell away with her inhibitions, and she became a creature of want and need and fierce joy. When they finally joined, it was with a rightness that made her cry out, clutching his shoulders and feeling complete for the first time in her life. Afterward, they lay entwined, skin cooling in the night air. Taza traced patterns on her back, and she realized he was drawing the pictographs from the canyon wall. "What do they mean?" she asked drowsily. "This one means eternal. This, belonging. And this," his finger stilled, "this means home." "Home," Caroline repeated, understanding flooding through her. "That's what this is. What you are. Home." They made love again as dawn approached, slower this time, learning each other's rhythms. When exhaustion finally claimed them, they slept deeply, truly safe for the first time since the riders came. Caroline woke to sunlight and the smell of coffee. She found Taza in the kitchen, moving carefully but steadily, his shoulder already improving. "A husband should make his wife breakfast after wedding night," he said, offering her a cup. She accepted it gratefully, then noticed something different about the room. Small touches, wildflowers in a jar, her favorite cup set out. The chairs arranged so they could sit side by side rather than across from each other. "You're making this ours," she said softly. It was always ours, he corrected. From the moment you arrived. I just didn't know it yet. They spent the morning in peaceful domesticity, but both knew it couldn't last. The threat of the posse hung over them like storm clouds. That afternoon, as Caroline tended the garden and Taza repaired fence one-handed, she made a decision. I want to write to someone, she announced at dinner. Taza looked wary. Who? My cousin Elizabeth in San Francisco. She married a judge there. They're different from most. They might help us. Help how? No white judge will recognize Apache marriage. Maybe not, but if anyone could find a way to make it legal, it's Elizabeth's husband. And if we had papers, real papers. Caroline reached across to take his hand. It might not stop everyone, but it would make it harder for them to separate us. Taza considered this. You would reach out to family you haven't spoken to in years? For me? For us, Caroline corrected. For the life we're building. For the children we might have someday. His eyes widened at that, and his grip on her hand tightened. Children? Did you think I was too old? She teased, though part of her worried it was true. I think you are perfect, he said seriously. But children, our children would face even more hardship than we do. Our children would be strong, Caroline said firmly. Raised with love, taught to be proud of who they are. Like your mother raised you. He lifted their joined hands and kissed her knuckles. Write your letter, but until we hear back, we prepare for the worst. Over the following weeks, they fell into a new rhythm. Days were spent strengthening defenses, Taza teaching Caroline to shoot despite his healing shoulder. Caroline teaching him to read better so he could understand any legal documents. Nights were spent in each other's arms, every joining a reaffirmation of their vows. Caroline learned the Apache words he murmured against her skin. Beloved. Precious one. My heart. She taught him the poetry her mother had loved, whispering verses as they moved together. The letter went out with the monthly supply wagon, and they waited. But even in waiting, even with danger lurking beyond their valley, Caroline had never been happier. She'd found something worth fighting for, someone worth any sacrifice. Do you regret it? Taza asked one night as they watched stars from their doorstep. Choosing this life? Choosing me? Caroline turned in his arms, seeing the vulnerability he still carried despite their bond. The only thing I regret, she said, is that it took so long to find you. He held her tighter, and she felt him breathe her name like a prayer of gratitude. Whatever came next, posse or papers, acceptance or exile, they would face it together. Two hearts, one spirit, until the stars fell from the sky. The morning they came for her, Caroline was hanging laundry while humming an old hymn her mother used to sing. The white sheets flapped like surrender flags in the desert breeze, and for a moment, she didn't hear the approaching horses over the wind. Then Shadow, Taza's paint mare, whinnied sharply. A warning. Caroline dropped the wet shirt she'd been holding and ran for the house, but it was too late. They surrounded her before she could reach the door. Not just 4 men this time, but 12, including Sheriff Watson from Cedar Falls. Mrs. Whitmore, the sheriff said, tipping his hat with mock courtesy. Or should I say, Mrs. Redhawk? The men laughed at his joke. Sheriff, Caroline said evenly, though her heart pounded. What brings you to our property? Your property? Watson's eyebrows rose. Ma'am, you can't own property. You're either a widow with no rights or the captive of a savage. Either way, we're here to rescue you. I don't need rescuing. Caroline lifted her chin. I'm a married woman in my own home. Married? Another man, wearing a minister's collar, stepped forward. I'm Reverend Pritchard, Mrs. Whitmore. No Christian marriage has taken place here. Whatever heathen ritual that Apache subjected you to. Where is my husband? Caroline interrupted, fear spiking through her. Taza had been in the far pasture, checking cattle. They must have waited for him to be away. The Apache is being dealt with, Watson said coolly. Now come along quietly. or we'll have to use force." Caroline backed toward the house, but 2 men had circled behind her. "You have no right." "We have every right." Watson cut her off. "Your father, Mr. Charles Whitmore of Columbus, has petitioned for your return. Says you've been corrupted by that savage, possibly against your will. As a woman under your father's protection, you have no say in the matter." "My father?" Caroline's voice cracked. "The man who'd turned her away when James died, who'd said she was no daughter of his when she couldn't pay her husband's debts. He's found you a proper husband," Reverend Pritchard added. "Mr. Josiah Brennan, a good Christian man with a prosperous farm. He's willing to overlook your unfortunate circumstances. I'm already married, to a heathen, in a heathen ceremony. It means nothing in the eyes of God or law." The Reverend's face was pitiless. "Come now, sister. Let us save your immortal soul." When Caroline tried to run, they caught her easily. She fought like a wildcat, remembering Taza's lessons, and managed to blacken one man's eye before they subdued her. They bound her wrists, lifted her onto a horse. "Where is Taza?" she demanded. "What have you done with him?" Watson smiled coldly. "He's alive, for now, locked in Murphy's old mine shaft. Whether he stays that way depends on you coming quietly." The ride to town was a nightmare. Caroline memorized every landmark, every turn, planning escape even as they guarded her closely. They'd underestimated her once. They wouldn't again. In Cedar Falls, they locked her in the church vestry, a small room with one high window and a solid door. Reverend Pritchard's wife, a sour-faced woman named Prudence, was assigned to guard her. Such a shame. Prudence tutted, bringing Caroline water and stale bread. "A white woman degrading herself with a savage. But Mr. Brennan is generous to still want you." "I don't want Mr. Brennan," Caroline said through gritted teeth. "Want?" Prudence laughed. "What does want matter? You'll marry him tomorrow noon, willin' or not. The sheriff can make it legal either way." That night, Caroline tested every board, every window latch. Solid. She could hear men talking outside. They'd posted guards. But as the hours passed, the voices grew more distant. Liquor, probably, celebrating their rescue of a fallen woman. Near dawn, Caroline heard scratching at the high window. A moment later, a familiar face appeared. Rosa, one of the saloon girls she'd been kind to during her desperate days. "Thought you might need help," Rosa whispered, passing down a small knife and a bundle. "That Apache man of yours, he helped my brother once, got him doctor when nobody else would touch a Mexican boy." Inside the bundle, men's clothes, a hat, boot polish. "They're planning to hang him after your wedding," Rosa added urgently. "Make it look like he went crazy, attacked them." Caroline's blood turned ice. "Where?" "Old mine shaft, north of town, but it's guarded." "You'll need a distraction." Rosa smiled grimly. "Lucky for you, the saloon girls owe you for treating us decent. We'll give those guards something else to think about." Caroline changed quickly, using the boot polish to darken her face and hands. The clothes hung loose, but would pass in darkness. She cut her hair short with savage strokes, watching her feminine locks fall like chains being severed. "You sure about this?" Rosa asked. "That Brennan fellow might not be so bad. Safe life, proper house. I'd rather die." Caroline said flatly, "I've had proper... I choose love." Rosa helped her through the window just as shouts erupted from the saloon, the promised distraction. Caroline dropped to the ground and ran, keeping to shadows, her heart pounding with fear for Taza. The mine shaft sat 2 miles from town. Its entrance partially collapsed. 2 guards lounged outside, passing a bottle. Caroline crept closer, then saw her chance when one walked into the brush to relieve himself. She struck him with a rock, dropping him cleanly. The second guard turned at the sound, but Caroline was already moving. She'd learned well from Taza. Use surprise. Use their expectations against them. They saw a boy in the dark, not a woman. By the time he realized his mistake, her knife was at his throat. "Keys," she hissed. He handed them over with shaking hands. Caroline tied him up with his own belt, gagged him with his bandana, then unlocked the heavy wooden door barring the mine entrance. Taza. Movement in the darkness. Then his voice, rough with thirst. Caroline? She nearly sobbed with relief, rushing to him. They'd chained him to a timber, beaten him. She could see bruises even in the dim light, but he was alive. You crazy woman, he breathed as she worked at the locks. You should have run far away. Without you, never. The chains fell away, and she helped him stand. Can you ride? To hell itself if you're with me. They took the guards' horses, riding hard for the ranch, but as dawn broke, Caroline knew they couldn't stay. The whole town would come for them now. They had perhaps an hour to gather what they could. At the ranch, Caroline packed food and ammunition while Taza saddled their best horses. She grabbed the leather journal where she'd pressed flowers from their canyon wedding spot, his mother's jewelry box, the few precious photographs. The letter, she said suddenly. From Elizabeth. I never got to see if she replied. No time, Taza said gently. We ride for Mexico. Now. As they mounted up, Caroline looked back at the valley that had become home, the garden she'd tended, the house where they'd made love, the stream where they'd made vows. All lost now. We'll find another home, Taza promised, reading her sorrow. I had a home, Caroline said, touching the necklace at her throat. I still do. It rides beside me. They pushed south as the sun climbed, two figures against the vast desert, racing toward an uncertain future but away from certain death. Behind them, dust clouds marked pursuit, but they had good horses and better motivation. At a narrow canyon, Taza led them up a hidden trail he'd scouted years ago. They climbed high into the rocks as the posse thundered past below, following false tracks Taza had cleverly laid. That night, camped in a cave high above the desert floor. Caroline tended Taza's injuries properly. His back was a map of welts, his wrists raw from chains. She cried as she cleaned each wound. No tears, he said softly. We're free. We're together. Nothing else matters. They hurt you because of me, because you chose a white woman. He silenced her with a kiss. I chose my wife, my heart. I would endure it all again for one more day with you. They made love carefully, mindful of his injuries but needing the connection, the affirmation of life after so much violence. Under the stars, with coyotes singing in the distance, they reaffirmed their vows with bodies and souls. Tell me about Mexico, Caroline whispered against his chest. Wild places where Apache and Mexican live side by side. Not easy, but possible. We find land, build new home, raise horses, make babies. His hand splayed across her belly. Strong babies with your courage and my stubbornness. That's a terrifying combination. Caroline laughed softly. Beautiful combination, he corrected. They slept entwined, taking turns watching for pursuit. In the morning, they would continue south, toward a future uncertain but unafraid. They had lost their valley but kept their love, and for two souls who'd found each other against all odds, that was enough. The desert stretched endless before them, dangerous but full of possibility. Somewhere beyond the horizon lay a place where an Apache man and a white woman could simply be husband and wife. They would find it or die trying. Together. The ghost village appeared through the shimmering heat like a mirage abandoned adobes, crumbling back into the earth. A small cemetery with wooden crosses bleached white by the desert sun. Caroline pulled up her exhausted horse, squinting against the glare. What is this place? She asked, though part of her already knew from the reverent way Taza had dismounted. My mother's birthplace, he said quietly, before the soldiers came. They'd been running for 5 days, zigzagging through canyons and across alkali flats, the posse persistent but gradually falling behind. Their water was nearly gone, the horses stumbling with fatigue. This ruined village, with its memories of massacre, might be their salvation or their grave. Taza led them to a partially collapsed building near the cemetery. Inside, miraculously, an old well still held water. They drank deeply, filled their canteens, watered the grateful horses. She told me stories, Taza said, running his hand along a smoke-blackened wall. 20 families lived here, Mexican and Apache, intermarried, peaceful. Then the territory wanted the land for mining. They said the village harbored raiders. His voice turned bitter. Easier to kill everyone than sort truth from lies. Caroline touched his arm gently. How old was she when? 12, hid in the well while her family burned. A passing Apache band found her 3 days later, more dead than alive. He turned to look at Caroline. She never spoke of revenge, only of rebuilding, finding peace. She would have loved you, because I'm stubborn enough to marry her stubborn son. Because you see people, not colors. He pulled her close despite the heat. She always said the heart knows no borders. They made camp in the most intact building, hanging blankets to create shade. As the sun peaked, they explored carefully, finding a hidden spring that fed scraggly cottonwoods. Even a small patch of corn gone wild but still producing. We could rest here a few days, Caroline suggested. Let the horses recover, gather supplies. But that evening, as they shared a meager meal of jerky and wild corn, dust clouds appeared on the northern horizon. Persistent devils, Taza muttered. How did they track us through all those canyons? His face darkened. Money. They hired Paiute trackers. No Apache would hunt me, but Paiute, he shrugged. Old enemies make convenient allies for white gold. They prepared to run again, but Caroline's mare chose that moment to come up lame, favoring her left foreleg. Examination revealed a stone bruise. Painful, but not permanent, if given time to heal. Take my horse, Taza said immediately. I'll follow on foot. Lay false trails. No. Caroline's voice cut sharp as flint. We stay together or not at all? Caroline, be practical. I'm being practical. You think I could live knowing I left you behind? Think I could face our children someday and tell them I abandoned their father to save myself? She shook her head fiercely. We make our stand here. Taza studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. My warrior wife. Then we prepare. They worked through the night, setting up defenses. The ruined village offered good positions, walls to shelter behind, multiple escape routes if needed. Taza showed Caroline where to position herself for best advantage, drilled her again on reloading quickly. Remember, they want to take you alive. Use that. Let them get close, thinking you'll surrender. Then strike. Dawn came too soon. The posse appeared with it. 8 men, including the Paiute trackers. No Sheriff Watson this time, Caroline noted. This was a hired group. Bounty hunters most likely. More dangerous in some ways. Less bound by even the pretense of law. The leader, a grizzled man with cold blue eyes, called out, We know you're in there. Make it easy on everyone. Send out the woman, and we'll let you go. Apache, Taza snorted. They think I'm stupid. Mrs. Whitmore. The leader tried again. Your father's offering good money for your safe return. Brennan, too. You don't have to die in this godforsaken place. Caroline made her voice sound weak, frightened. I want to come out, but he won't let me. He's got me chained. She saw the men exchange glances, relaxing slightly. The hysterical woman, overpowered by the savage. It fit their narrative perfectly. Just stay calm. Ma'am, we're coming for you. They approached carelessly, bunched together, focused on the building where Caroline's voice had emerged. They didn't notice Taza circling behind until his first shot took down one of the trackers. The fight erupted in chaos. Caroline fired from her position. Remembering Taza's lessons, squeeze, don't jerk, breathe between shots. A man fell clutching his shoulder. Another cursed as her bullet destroyed his rifle stock. But there were too many, and they were experienced fighters. Soon Caroline found herself driven back, deeper into the ruins. She could hear Taza still firing from somewhere to her left, but couldn't see him. A bounty hunter appeared in the doorway. Caroline's gun clicked empty. She grabbed a broken timber and swung with all her strength, catching him in the knee. He went down howling, and she snatched his pistol. Caroline! Taza's warning came just as another man grabbed her from behind. She drove her elbow back, twisted, bit down hard on the arm around her throat. The man screamed and loosened his grip enough for her to break free. She ran, dodging between buildings, using the maze of ruins to her advantage. But they knew she was separated from Taza now, and they pressed their advantage. She found herself cornered in the cemetery, backed against her mother-in-law's grave marker, a simple stone Taza had placed years ago, fitting place for a last stand, she thought grimly. 3 men advanced on her. Her stolen pistol held maybe 2 shots. Now, little lady, the leader said, hands raised peacefully. No need for more bloodshed. Your man's probably dead anyway. A shot rang out, and the speaker clutched his arm, spinning around. Taza emerged from the ruins like an avenging spirit, blood running from a gash on his forehead, but very much alive. My wife, he said in a voice like death, is not yours to take. The remaining men calculated odds wounded comrades. A defensible position. 2 very determined opponents. The mathematics of greed shifted. This ain't worth dying for, one muttered. The breed's right, another agreed. Let Brennan fetch his own woman. They gathered their wounded and retreated. But the leader called back. This isn't over. There'll be others. Let them come, Taza replied. We'll be gone. But as the dust of their departure settled, he swayed. Caroline caught him as he fell to his knees, seeing what the adrenaline of battle had hidden, a deep gash in his side, bleeding freely. Just a graze, he tried to say, but blood bubbled on his lips. Don't you dare, Caroline said fiercely, pressing her hands against the wound. Don't you dare die on me, Taza Redhawk. I didn't fight off 8 men to lose you now. She half carried, half dragged him to the sheltered spring. With shaking hands, she cleaned and bound the wound, packed it with the healing herbs he taught her to recognize. The bullet had passed through, missing vital organs but leaving damage enough. For 2 days he burned with fever. Caroline bathed him constantly, dribbled water between his lips, talked to him endlessly about their future, their unborn children, the ranch they'd build in Mexico, when he thrashed in delirium, calling for his mother in Apache. She sang the lullabies her own mother had sung, letting the melodies bridge the gap between worlds. On the 3rd dawn, his eyes opened clear. Caroline? His voice was weak but lucid. I'm here. She clutched his hand, tears streaming. I'm here, my love. The village. We must leave. When you're stronger, the horses are recovered. I've gathered supplies, but not until you can ride. He squeezed her fingers. Stubborn woman. You married me for it, she reminded him. A week later, they buried the past in that cemetery, leaving flowers on his mother's grave, saying prayers for all the ghosts. Then they mounted up and rode south once more, Taza still weak but determined. The village fell away behind them, but something had been born in its ruins. They'd been tested by fire and blood and hadn't broken. Whatever Mexico held, whatever challenges awaited, they would face them as they'd faced everything else, together, until the mountains fell and the streams ran dry, as they crested the last ridge before the border. Caroline looked back once at the land that had tried to tear them apart. Then she turned her face south, toward hope, her hand finding Taza's across the space between their horses. No looking back, he said softly. Only forward, she agreed. Always forward. The desert stretched endless before them, but somewhere beyond the horizon lay a place where their love wasn't a crime, where their children could grow proud and free. They would find it. They had survived too much to settle for less. The border was nothing more than a muddy river and a wooden sign shot full of holes, but crossing it felt like stepping through a doorway between worlds. On one side lay everything that had tried to destroy them. On the other, the unknown promise of freedom. They'd been traveling for 2 weeks since leaving the ghost village, Taza's wound healing slowly but steadily. The landscape had shifted from red rock desert to scrubland dotted with mesquite and ocotillo. Now, with the Rio Grande behind them, Mexico stretched out in shades of brown and gold. Water, Taza said suddenly, pointing to a line of green in the distance. And smoke, a settlement. Caroline's stomach tightened. They'd avoided people during their flight, but they needed supplies desperately. Their ammunition was nearly gone, their food down to a handful of corn and dried meat. The village appeared as they descended into a valley, adobe houses clustered around a small plaza, a white church with a bell tower, fields of corn and beans stretching toward the river. Children playing in the dust stopped to stare as the strangers rode in. An old woman sitting in a doorway called out in Spanish. Taza responded, his voice respectful, and she gestured toward a building that might have been a store or trading post. "What did she say?" Caroline asked. "She welcomes travelers and says Miguel will help us." He paused. "She also says I married well, the guerra with fire in her eyes." Caroline laughed. The first real laugh in weeks. Fire in my eyes, more like trail dust. Inside the trading post, Miguel proved to be a weathered man with knowing eyes. He took in their travel-worn appearance, the way they moved to protect each other's backs, the wedding necklace at Caroline's throat. "Apache," he said to Taza. Not a question. "Half." Taza replied carefully. Miguel nodded. "And the señora is your wife?" "I see." He studied them another moment. "You run from American law, yes? Many do. Mexico asks fewer questions, but life here is not easy." "We don't seek easy," Caroline said in the Spanish Taza had been teaching her, "only peace." Something in Miguel's face softened. "Then you have come to the right place. My brother has land to the south, good for cattle, horses, needs workers who know the trade." He looked at Taza meaningfully. "Apache know horses better than any." They stayed in the village 3 days, resting, resupplying, learning the rhythms of this new world. The people were cautious but not hostile. They'd seen too many refugees from north of the border to judge harshly. Caroline helped the women with corn grinding, earning approving nods for her willingness to work. Taza assisted the men with a broken corral, his strength returning as his wound healed. On the third evening, as they prepared to leave for Miguel's brother's ranch, Caroline felt the first flutter in her belly. She'd suspected for days, but hadn't wanted to speak it aloud until she was certain. Now, sitting by their small fire while Taza cleaned his rifle, she placed her hand over her stomach and knew. "Taza!" Something in her voice made him look up sharply. "You are well. The riding has been too hard. I'm pregnant." The rifle slipped from his hands. He stared at her, a dozen emotions crossing his face. Joy, fear, wonder, worry. "You're certain?" She nodded. "The sickness in the mornings I blamed on bad water. The fatigue I thought was from running. But it's been 2 months since my last blood, and now I feel different." He was beside her in an instant, his large hands hovering over her belly as if afraid to touch. "A child. Our child. Born free," Caroline said softly. "Never to know the hatred we left behind." He pulled her against him carefully, as if she might break. "Everything changes now. We cannot take risks." "Everything already changed the day I chose you." Caroline interrupted. "This just makes it more wonderful and terrifying." They reached the ranch 2 days later, a sprawling operation run by Miguel's brother Carlos and his extended family. The main house sat on a rise overlooking pastures where horses and cattle grazed. It wasn't the hidden valley they'd lost, but it had its own rough beauty. Carlos, a man cut from the same leather as his brother, evaluated them shrewdly. "Miguel says you know horses and cattle, says the woman has steel in her spine and the man has honor despite American lies. This is enough for a trial. Work hard, cause no trouble, and there's a cottage by the stream and wages enough to live." The cottage was small but solid, 2 rooms with a proper stove and windows facing the mountains. Caroline stood in what would be their bedroom, imagining a cradle in the corner. Children's laughter filling the space. "It's perfect," she said. Taza wrapped his arms around her from behind, hands splaying protectively over where their child grew. "You deserve better. A fine house, servants, safety. I deserve exactly what I have," Caroline said firmly. "A husband who loves me, honest work, a place to raise our family. The rest is just details." Life settled into new rhythms. Taza worked with the horses, his gift with the animals evident immediately. Caroline took charge of the ranch kitchen, cooking for the workers. her skills appreciated by men long tired of their own poor efforts. Her belly grew rounder as months passed, and the Mexican women clucked over her, sharing remedies for morning sickness and advice for birthing. One evening, as autumn cooled the air, a commotion arose in the yard. Riders approaching. American riders, by their look. Caroline's blood chilled until she recognized the lead figure. "Elizabeth?" she breathed. Her cousin, dressed in traveling clothes but still elegantly composed, dismounted with the help of a distinguished older man, her husband, the judge. "Caroline," Elizabeth embraced her carefully, mindful of her pregnant state. "My dear, we've been searching for months. Your letter reached us just as news came of your departure. We've come to help." "Over dinner," Judge Morrison explained. "Your marriage, performed according to Apache custom, has no legal standing in American law. However," he smiled, "Mexico recognizes indigenous ceremonies. And I've brought papers that, properly filed here, will make your union legal in both countries." "Why?" Taza asked bluntly. "Why help us?" The judge and Elizabeth exchanged glances. "Our own son," Elizabeth said softly. "Born different, what they call simple-minded. The world has been cruel to him for something beyond his control. We understand what it means to love someone society rejects." Caroline wept then, hormones and relief overwhelming her. Family. After so long alone, she had family again. They stayed a week, the judge handling legalities while Elizabeth helped prepare for the baby. When they left, Caroline was no longer a runaway, but a legally married woman. Her child legitimate. Their future secured by paper as well as love. Winter came mild to this part of Mexico. Caroline grew heavy with child while Taza built furniture with his healing hands. A table, chairs, the cradle she'd imagined. He sang Apache lullabies to her belly at night, teaching their unborn child the language of his people. When her time came on a clear February morning, the Mexican midwife and ranch women surrounded her with confident care. Taza paced outside like a caged mountain cat until Caroline demanded he come hold her hand. "Together," she gasped between contractions. "We do everything together." He stayed then, letting her grip his fingers hard enough to crack bones, whispering encouragement in English and Apache in Spanish, all the languages their child would know. When their daughter finally arrived, squalling and perfect, with Caroline's fair skin and Taza's dark hair, they looked at each other in wonder. "What do we name her?" the midwife asked. Caroline looked at Taza, remembering another dawn, another birth of sorts. "Hope," she said. "We name her Hope." Years later, Caroline would stand in the doorway of what had become a small restaurant, watching Hope play with her younger brothers while Taza taught them to ride. The business served travelers and locals alike, Caroline's cooking drawing people from miles around. Sometimes Americans would pass through, their eyes widening at the sight of the mixed family. But they were in Mexico now, where such families were common enough, where the law protected rather than persecuted them. "No regrets?" Taza would ask sometimes, echoing that old question. "None," Caroline would answer, and mean it. They'd lost a valley but gained a life, lost a homeland but found a home, and in the end, love had been stronger than hate, courage more powerful than fear. In the growing dusk, with her children's laughter mixing with the desert wind, Caroline touched the turquoise at her throat and smiled. They'd traveled hard roads to reach this peace, but every step had been worth it. Every single step. Thank you so much for listening to this tale of love conquering prejudice in the Old West. Where are you enjoying this story from? I'd love to hear. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If you enjoyed Caroline and Taza's journey, please subscribe to Wild West Campfire for more authentic frontier love stories. Share your thoughts about their incredible romance in the comments. Until next time, partners.